people who retire don't want to they retire and they're like, all right, what can I do now, right? They don't want to work the 40 hours. They don't want to go into an office every day anymore. They don't want to be on the road selling, or as you mentioned before, the plumbers, the electricians. That if they are able to take advantage of an AI tool and teach it or talk to it about how to do some applications and the way they were doing them, and that knowledge now can be used to get passed on, oh my God, that is just nirvana, from both sides.
When I bring guests on, I always ask them, will you teach me something? Which means teach you something. And for today's guest, Anthony Testa, that was easy because he has an incredible amount to teach us in an area that's often overlooked. How do you build a product content and a supplier management team? People, like, how do you structure it? Where do they report? And what do the different teams actually do? Anthony Testa has a background in all of this. He led product management at MSC Industrial, and today he's breaking it all down for us. I love this conversation with Anthony. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Let's get into it.
All right, so this is my first question, and I don't think I've talked to anybody that's actually designed a team for product content, supplier relations. I've done a lot of technical, like how to build product content and taxonomies and PIM and things like that. But the actual structuring of the team itself and who does what, I'm really interested in learning from you, Anthony. And I'm curious, going back to MSC, like what did that team or what did content look like in the beginning? Like when you started here, what did it look like back in the day?
It's funny because it was a wild, wild west. And you just think back, and the issue that, and one of the bigger things that distributors and manufacturers have is that they try to design their new content based on what they already have. And that is a disaster, right? You literally need a clean slate, because as the old adage says, is garbage in, garbage out. And a lot of times when you look at what most manufacturers and most distributors have, if they try to rely on the content that they already have and they try to map it over to the new system, right, it typically will not work. You have to go through a cleansing phase.
Well, what kind of data, like when you say that, like was that data that came from the ERP? Is that like because it was internally facing, or like why was it so bad? Why is it so bad?
Because it wasn't organized. There was no PIM. When you ask the question, what did it look like? I mean, this is before PIM systems. MSC went through 2 PIM systems that, when I was there, and they were ready to look at another one because they continue to evolve. So when we started, the PIM system that we first purchased was, and again, we took that content that we currently housed and we put it into that PIM system. Disastrous. We should have never done something like that. Then we went from that to what we called world-class data. And then we tried to truly cleanse. We hired outside service to help guide us and put us on the right path. But our world-class data piece shined a light on how to truly do our data and our content. And this is throughout. I mean, this is not just from a marketing perspective, but also internal. Our AS400 system, our being consistent there, being consistent throughout all of our systems. So the data out to our customers and the data out to our warehouse and the data out to our logistics, data out is just pristine. And there's no real questions about it. It's very, very important to standardize your overall content down to, and you have to break it up into customer facing content, right? That marketing type of content, and then the internal content, like your order system, your ERP, your accounting system, things of that nature too. So, how you do your invoicing, how you do your purchasing, it should all be consistent. And if it's not consistent and if it's out of whack, they won't they won't talk to each other unless you map it somehow. And then there's a cost to that.
How did you decide that you needed to do all that with your data? Like, do you remember like how long ago was that?
Oh, you're talking in the early 2000s, right?
Okay.
So it was, that's when we really just said, we need something to help do this. And we were, again, I remember too, MSC, when they were doing a big book, that content was housed, but it was just for the book. It wasn't for the back end system, right? So that's where our worlds collided, was the publishing content and our actual database content. Just they were totally different, 2 different systems, 3 different systems if you count our accounting system. So we had to bring everything together, so it's something that we had to bring all together. So that was the crux of us saying, hey, we need to do something. And so let's start first on the marketing side, and then let's take that and go downstream with it. But our first investment was having our marketing and, let's call it, catalog data match our data for our web, data for anything else that were customer facing. So it was consistent and housed in the same space.
And did you put that in a PIM?
So that's
PIM at the time, or eventually?
Yeah, eventually that's when the PIM system came about.
What was the data, like kind of transactional ERP data, different from the PIM data? Because it was, so you have customer facing data in, customer facing marketing content in the PIM, data in your ERP that's more internal facing. I'm sure it had like abbreviations and codes in there that you guys understood, but a customer never would.
Customer would never understand it. But that, unfortunately, that when you look at all your manifests, that internal gets externalized, right? So when you do crossovers and you do RFPs and you take data from customers and you match it with your internal data, and then you go back to your customer and hand them that, they were like, well, what does this mean? Because our data, our internal ERP data, was never clean. And so we went through that world-class data cleansing, and we did both sides and said, we need to invest in this.
How did you get budget and resources to do that with the executive team? Did they understand the value of it? Did it take time to help them figure it out? Like, what did that look like?
They understood the value of it, because just from our again, the marketing data not matching what we housed internally and the downstream impact that had, it totally was obvious. When we invested in that PIM system, and then we created the teams now to manage, it was an evolution from start to finish. And it's data is never ending. It's always going to be an evolution, what your teams will continue to work on. So like, once you get your data organized, you have to have a compliance team to make sure that new data coming in matches the current data format that you have. Because if you don't, again, that garbage in, garbage out, or if you get things in uppercase and you have it in lowercase, or you have abbreviations like BL, is BL from a color perspective, is that blue or is that black? It's making sure, dashes are another big thing. So like, a lot of people will put, your description dash and then the size. Does that dash stay there? So you need, from an organization piece, you need to make sure that you create your schema and taxonomy. And once you have that locked down, you have that, I call them the data police, but it's really the data governance, the data compliance folks. That team now owns making sure that data stays pristine. So now, as you collect information from your manufacturers and other folks, you are taking that data and making sure that it maps the right way into your system, the way you've set it up. So that's really important. So the way to, and we were talking about how to structure this, basically you have a data operations team that does your day-to-day, but the compliance team, and I'll call them the compliance police, the data police, everything that they do has to go into a non-published, like a stage where
staging area
where it sits. The data governance team takes it, scrubs it, makes sure that it's right. But you also have to give data operations that these are the rules. Clean up as much as you possibly can. This way, everything doesn't sit on data compliance, that they're truly what their name is. It's data compliance. They're going to say yep or no, and then kick it back to data operations and say, this doesn't fit our formats. You got to fix it. Here's reasons why. It's not that data compliance does the work.
Help me understand the model of the teams, the people themselves. So in my head, there's a couple layers. One is kind of working with suppliers, building that relationship with the supplier relations. Then you have people kind of making sure the data is correct, or collecting, importing, bringing Excel files. And then you have the data governance side that is making sure it applies to rules, right? The rules
Correct.
they have. Then obviously you have the technology that helps kind of probably in all of those.
Correct.
Are those three separate teams?
So
do you see them as combined? Like how?
I really have it as two separate teams when we set them up, right? So and you can have, so data operations is your bigger team. That's the team that does the first phases of gathering the data with suppliers, working with suppliers.
Do they talk to the suppliers?
They are part of that negotiation, right? Part of the team that does have that supplier facing role.
Okay.
So they're the ones who are talking to the supplier or the manufacturer's marketing team, working with them to collect their data. They're the ones that are sending them the spreadsheets, collecting that information. They're doing that overview, and then they're handing it off to that staging area and saying, okay, here's what I have. Here's here's where it belongs. Here's here's the mapping that it's supposed to go into. And then the data governance team now works and checks and says, okay, this check. Oh, you know what? This doesn't belong here. They'll have a conversation with data operations and say, hey, this really doesn't belong here. Here's where we feel it should go. If it's a jump ball, they're going to bring it to like a smaller team and say, guys, what do you think? The leadership of the product management team and the data team, and say, what do we think about this? Okay, it belongs here. And that really shouldn't happen as much these days, because the rules should be pretty structured. And a lot of times PIM systems now and structures are allowing data to go in multiple different areas, right? So the best example I can give you here is just when you think about data, right? You're thinking about, this is how I was kind of taught, right? You're thinking about aisles in a store, right? So you're going down an aisle in a store and I want cereal. I'm going to the cereal aisle. I'm looking up. Yep, cereal, here I am. I'm grabbing my box of cereal and I'm on my way. But now there's gluten-free cereal. But gluten-free sometimes has its own aisle. So where does this item truly belong? And that's where the data governance team comes in that jump ball that I was just mentioning. If your system can only put it in one spot, where's the best spot for customers to go and view that product? It's what is it first? And the way we've always defined it, and my recommendation always, is to say, first and foremost, that product is a cereal. And then within cereal, you can look and have an attribute that says gluten-free cereal.
So there's kind of two aspects from what you're saying then. So there's the data itself, getting the data, making sure you have the attributes, the descriptions, the images. And obviously that's representative. It could be representative of a large catalog that you're getting from the suppliers. And then you're talking about, now where do we put it? How do we categorize it? Like in what category, right?
Correct.
And sometimes that's a negotiation to figure out where that goes. So there's some percentage that's really easy to figure out. There's some percentage that needs kind of manual intervention to say, it could be this one or this one, make a decision. And then you're saying there's a small amount we have to actually work together as a small team or work with a supplier to actually make a decision about where that goes.
Correct. Because the supplier could have fed it to us, could have fed it to the distributor to say, it's first gluten-free and then it's cereal, but it's the opposite side. It's truly first a cereal, and an attribute of cereal is gluten-free.
Gluten-free, right?
Right. So they may have their attributes a little bit wrong, The operation,
Mm.
the data operations person may have processed it the way they got it. That's where data compliance comes in and says, no, this is not this way. We don't market it this way, right? So that's some of the pushback that you may get from data governance, on top of spelling and just abbreviations and things of that nature. It's not the way we do it. Here's how we do it.
How did you enforce or get adoption from the suppliers to be in that type of relationship where they were sending data to you guys on a regular basis? Was that part of like the contracts that you guys created with the suppliers?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say contracts. I'm going to say more of working closely with suppliers. And again, going back to that evolution, data is a continued evolution. The manufacturers are having the same issues. They're trying to categorize all of their products also. Sometimes it doesn't map through properly. So and we'll use industrial as what we're talking about today. So you have, the blue book, you have the red book, you have the yellow book. So all those folks may have different formats, the way they give to their manufacturers, suppliers, and we're all using the same suppliers and manufacturers. So they're trying to adapt the best way they possibly can to make sure that their data can just map in. They just need to understand the headings and understand how each distributor does it. And then they format to the way it's asked for. Some of the manufacturers are better than most. I'm going to say the more of the retail type of manufacturers are really, really good at data and content, because they had to do it way before industrial.
Yeah.
Because they were asked for that. But if you look at some of the others who didn't play in the retail arena, they're playing catch up, and they're playing, or if they have a lot of product that have a lot of similarities, that they were able to use one type of image and one type of description to fit most, right? And the only difference is, like, we were talking about before, what's the difference between a 9 ounce and a 12 ounce cup? Well, it's a couple of 3 ounces, so it's, they sometimes may not have all that data. So they're playing catch up on a lot of that stuff. And that's where the data operations team really works closely with those manufacturers. And as you mentioned before, it's that, that relationship that helps coach them and then allows them to get it done. The biggest obstacle that you run against is when the manufacturer relies on the salesperson to fill out all of the data sheets. They just don't have the bandwidth. And a lot of times it's a true bottleneck. They need to set up their own teams. They need to be able to have a marketing person that's in charge of data. They need to have a marketing person that works with distribution to pump out those data and that data set that is needed and required. I have seen so many times when we've asked for data that it sits at the salesperson. They're entering the new items. They're doing the new item setup sheets. They're doing all of this information, and it just takes them forever. And again, because they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the mind share and they don't know how to do it, to be honest with you.
All right. So, I think that makes a ton of sense. When you hire data operations people, like, who were the most successful, like, types of people? I'm not asking for names, but, like, who are the most successful people at doing data operations? I mean, because it's just not a role. I mean, data operations is a role that you see, but I think this type of data operations is completely different. And, like, what kind of people were successful?
So it's funny that you asked. Like, I never knew this existed until we started hiring for it, right? So roles like a taxonomist, right? So that's truly a role that's out there that people specialize in. It's part of data. Those people understand it. Those people were brought into that. That's what they went to school for. That's what they specialize in. Data scientists are another piece that you look for from looking to fill roles like this. And then you look at from just data engineers, another big one, title from that. And then so data ops is so big that if you just put out just, hey, I need a data operator, you're going to get all kinds of things. You're going to get someone who can just input things. You're going to get people that are just not skilled or just don't understand. You really need someone to understand the overall, what schema is, what taxonomy is, what content truly is, and what type of content is it. As we spoke before, you have your marketing content, you have your ERP content, two separate pieces, and you need people to understand that to help really fulfill those goals. And then from a data compliance, data governance piece, same type of thing. Data engineer, data scientists are the best folks that we have found to fill those roles.
But if on the data operations side, I would imagine there's some level of, they're working with suppliers, and I would imagine that relationship with the supplier becomes pretty important because they can extract lots of things out of the supplier, and whether it's content that doesn't fit a data operations role. Someone that's a data scientist typically is not a very good with people, or it's not part of the job description most of the time. How do those two things fit together?
So great question, and the best way I can explain it is when you're interviewing, I'd rather have that personality type of person in terms of this role that can really have a conversation that can speak to those suppliers. And if they're lacking a little bit, I'm not saying a ton, but if they're lagging behind on the actual, the data side, if they didn't come from industrial distribution or they came out of somewhere else, but they're very personable, I can always teach the type of product that we're trying to sell. I can't teach how to communicate. It's very difficult. Okay. That's a natural instinct that you want to make sure that from a trait perspective, and that's really in any role, right? They're dependent upon what that person's going to do for you.
So MSC obviously has much larger budgets and the appetite for people and things like that. First of all, how big was that team when you left?
It was big. It was at least 50 people.
50 people between ops and compliance,
yeah.
Wow. All right. So that kind of leads into the question, which is, if you're a $200 million distributor and you believe that data and content is a strategic asset for you, but you don't obviously have the appetite or the capability of hiring a large team, like how would you start that as with a 1-2 person team to start, and how would you justify the ROI on the team to continue to get more resources for that?
Great question. So it depends on, again, your strategy. If you're going to go out with a website and to your end users, is that web, that content, that marketing content is driving over 50-60% of your revenue, or that's your plan, then you want to invest in those people. If it's less than 20%, you may not invest as much, right? So maybe you're just more hand-to-hand combat. You're just more that sales, you're doing well. But once you get to a scale where you need to develop an app, you need to have a website that's transactional. You need to have a website to be relevant. You need to be able to take that and digitize that to your phone and just make it mobile. That's when this becomes really important. And the key here is, and again, as we started, you never want to start from what you have. You want to use what you have as let's call it a baseline, but you don't want to take that content and use it to put into a new system. You need to scrub that before you push it into a newly generated PIM, or even, smaller distributors, $200 million distributors may not even want to invest in a PIM system. They're still doing it from spreadsheets and doing it that way, or they're outsourcing it. So there's a way that you can scale that may not cost you as much. Yeah. So you have to balance the two. But the big thing you also need to remember is that you want to push the content back to the manufacturers. The manufacturers have to own it. Meaning, if you're dealing with the 3Ms, Kimberly-Clark, Stanley Black & Deckers, the big guys, or anybody that's manufacturing for you, their content needs to be pristine, and you need to really harp on that. because that's the data that you're taking. And now you have to now create a system for you that you know what's best for your end users. You have to take that content now, curate it, that it fits and talks to the customer that you're trying to attract and their persona.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So on the manufacturer side, what's their role in this? Like if you were on the flip side, knowing what you know about distributors, how would you, and your digital strategy was all about, kind of helping your distributors in their channel with their e-commerce. What would you look at for a plan as a manufacturer that way?
So from a manufacturer, again, and I'm doing that now with as I'm consulting is working with both manufacturing and distribution, two totally separate, different ways to go about it. And working with the manufacturer now today, one of the biggest challenges is not to have enough content, to have not to have enough robust content. And being a small manufacturer, we are making sure that we've dedicated someone just to ensure that we have every single attribute that is needed, every single piece of information that is needed. We make sure that we have, from an imaging perspective, 360 images that you can expand on, and it's all about, from a manufacturer, if you make it easier for an end user to view and find your product, they're more likely to buy. And it's you can't just say, yep, here's a photo, here's a description, here's a price, good luck. That doesn't work anymore. It's something from a manufacturer. They have to invest in their content. They have to invest in their team to make sure that it's done right. And then going back to, the requests that come in, again, from the larger distributors, they need to make sure that they can map their product offering to what the distributors are asking for. And that's really important. And they cannot rely, and I said this before, cannot rely on the salesperson. That salesperson has no idea. You have to have someone that specializes in content and content development.
So in the retail world, brands are used to owning their content with their marketplaces and retailers. And it's more than just owning. They want to control their brand out there. In the B2B world, like, we're just not there yet.
Correct.
Where I think there's quite a few brands that do feel that way about their brands, and like, we want to control it. We know that if we give the best content, we give our content the best chance to be found in search. Yep. And therefore more revenue going through that distributor, whether they're small, mid-size, whatever it might be. But I think that's only a few. And so manufacturers need to then start thinking about, okay, how do I control and own my own brand, my own products, which means owning my own content.
And when a lot of them get there, you see that their brand really escalate within their customer base, in the customer base that they're trying to market towards.
When they produce better content and syndicate more content, they improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I could tell you, like, again, going back to the retail piece and people owning the brand, working with 3M, they were phenomenal. Kimberly-Clark, they were phenomenal. They own their brand. They ensured that from a content perspective, they were pushing and syndicating things to us on a daily basis because they wanted to have updated content. They wanted to make sure that they were at the forefront of, for our customers. They wanted to make sure that they pushed things that are new, things that are, exciting. They wanted to make sure that their customers were able to, our customers or collective customers that were looking on our website, were able to find it. We're able to, to make buying decisions, make sure that the right attributes were there. So they were able to make those buying decisions and they didn't have to go somewhere else. That's the worst thing in the world. When you click on, if you go to a page and there's not enough information to buy and you have to click to go somewhere else and then go back and they go and say, all right, based on this price, I think this is the same thing. Click, I'll buy it. And then, again, your fingers are crossed. So, and you also, when you look at, again, going back to the larger industrial distributors, they have the brand recognition, next day service, cost is the best. It's logistically, you're going to get it. Fill rate is awesome. It's just, they have the table stakes. So you want to make sure that you are doing the right things, by them to make sure that your product stands out, because it's important. It's really, really important for that customer. One thing I just want to we jump off manufacturing, right? And distributors. So the one thing that is an interesting dynamic in all of this, and we talked about the large guys, but when you talk about some of the smaller folks, they work through what they call redistributors, right? So the RJ Sinners, the Ascendants of the world, Bunzel, the big redistributors that are out there. The redistributors do, I'm going to say, a horrible job at content. They should be, as a redistributor, just think about the value add that these guys can capture if they can just help curate content for the medium to small distributors.
Yeah,
it would be just an enormous
be a data pool. They could be a data pool themselves, because they'd have all the access to
it. They don't do it. Some AD does it, but they charge.
Yeah.
They charge for it. They charge to get in. They charge to get out. They it's like it's unbelievable. Their hand is in your pocket all the time.
Yeah.
So it's if a Redi, an R3, a Bunzel, like any of those guys, a Sinner, if those folks just had a team to help create content and be that data pool and help their medium to small distributors, people go to them all day long.
Yeah,
they don't, unfortunately.
There's more buying. So I was kind of one of the leaders of that AD content program when it first started. But there's quite a few other buying groups that are doing it. But you're right, the redistributors. Even though like Ascendant uses the same technology that all the brands do. Ascendant uses Salsify, so do all the brands, and so they're actually the closest in proximity to that data. And still, it's a struggle.
But they do it for themselves, right? So they're taking it and marketing for themselves.
Yep.
Their platform. They're not sharing it, giving
backwards to
right? And it's a shame. If they just said, "Hey, we're going to open up this part of our, we want to hire for this because we think that it would help increase our overall sales," and market that as and I'm not saying you have to give it away for free. I would like to see that, but small fee. AD it's over the top. Some distributors are buying into it, but it's pretty expensive.
Have you experienced this? So I've been watching this happen a little more, is where either a distributor or a manufacturer, creates a badged employee at each other's companies.
Absolutely.
Because there's such a significant relationship there, and it's so fast moving. It can't happen over Zoom. It has to happen in the hallways that this stuff is getting done.
Absolutely. So I could tell you some of the bigger guys were doing it for the Grangers of the world, MSCs of the world, Fastenals, right? So they were, paid by the manufacturer, but sat in
the distributors,
in the distributor's location. Yeah. Yep.
Just to be a part of like all the things and decisions that are making, and be able to make decisions themselves.
Correct. It's a huge, again, that goes back to the value add. That goes back to the manufacturer saying, we feel that if we place this person, our ROI will grow top line exponentially. So it's a pretty big investment from a manufacturer side.
Yeah, I agree. I've always wondered, this is actually something that I've kind of gone down the path of, and I've never been able to figure it out. I mean, I know some of the reasons why, but I don't know why anybody hasn't solved it. So Amazon, Walmart, Target, Lowe's, those companies, they all force the manufacturers to load the data, and then the system keeps everything in compliance, right? There's some people in the mix of it, of course, but most of the work is done by the brand manufacturing, deciding which category it goes into, making sure everything's filled out, and then they hit publish. And 90% of that data goes directly from there and is published to the website within, X amount of minutes, X amount of hours, whatever it might be. In the B2B world, we just don't do that. We might send them a template, we might send them email templates to get it back. And we know what email templates end up. They end up, one column gets moved over or whatever it might be. But the onus and really with it, what I'm getting at is the cost often gets moved to the distributor to handle that data. And I've never really understood why some of the big distributors haven't implemented technology like the Walmarts and Amazons of the world to force the manufacturer to say, hey, if you want to do business with us at all, your SKUs need to be in this format at this place. And I think you would get compliance for it.
So yes and no, right? So some of the bigger distributors have invested in something like that, but it's more of imaging, it's more of content creation, it's more of specials, special buy type things where it's one and done, where it doesn't just it just moves on quickly. So it's not their backbone of the of the system. So the big thing here from the industrials, and I could tell you living through it, there's such an investment and such a upfront commitment to it that you don't want that Trojan horse coming through and just relying on someone to just hit the button. And the next thing you know, you have, things just gray spelled, Gray, Grey, right? So which one is right? It just doesn't really work. So that's why that data compliance team is really, really important.
Yeah.
The evolution of AI is going to help this.
Mm-hmm.
So you overlay AI with those systems, the syndication systems, and say, this is what it needs to look like. This is where our rules come in. If it looks like this, it has to get changed to this. And that could be instantaneous. That's coming. That you will see, I'm going to say in the next, year or two, if it's already not, people, already have it designed. But that's coming down the pipe where all of this goes away. It all gets automated. The teams that we're talking about, unfortunately, go from 50 to 3. It's going to be that, AI is going to be that powerful that it's going to be you're going to be able to overlay it to this. And as long as you're making the rules and it understands it, it'll just do it. Done.
Yeah. What are the teams are there team structures that you kind of experimented with that just didn't work at all? You thought about your people?
It's again, going back to that evolution piece, as you start in the beginning and you start with that quote, if you're going to build that world-class data piece, you need a team to come in and make sure that you have someone that's going to help structure your, starting with your schema, then there's taxonomy and, getting everything organized and set. So those teams are rather large. You have to have, experts in there, that they really know the product or the type of SKUs that you're doing, and you do a section at a time. So it's an evolution. And then that team then owns that quote unquote world-class data. And then you break that up and then you put them onto the right teams. And you could really, as I mentioned before, you can really get away with two sides. It's truly a data operations piece and data governance. That's the most important thing that you have to make sure that you create when you build your teams. You can have a team, specific for the, website and doing things there. You can have, but all that stuff has to get fed from content. So the people who are in charge are the data folks.
Who, if you're in data operations and you're talking to a supplier, who are you talking to?
Hopefully,
what are their type of rules?
Hopefully it's there. It lands in marketing and many of the manufacturers. It'll land, data content will land in marketing. And there's a separate team set up for manufacturers to provide the content that is needed. And it's usually a one-to-one relationship. Like that one person or that person will talk to you is in charge of industrial. One person may be in charge of retail and so on and so forth. But it's typically that person who gets to know the formats and the way they need them, way distribution needs them. That person from a marketing perspective will go and do it. And that person works with, and again, depending on how large that manufacturer is and what their commitment is to data content. Is it full blown? Are they taking from a photography perspective, do they have a specific photographer in-house? Because photography is a big piece of this. Images sell, and I can't stress that enough. And then you have the people who are creating all the attributes for the type of product, the size, the shape, the color, all of those data attributes have to be created and done. And then, so there's different pieces from a manufacturer side that you need to collect and actually do. And then marketing takes it from there and brings it to, let's call it publication, which is into distribution.
Mm. What was your path to getting involved in this team or leading this team? Did you start off on technology side to come from the business? How did it start?
Not even close. So
neither,
right? So I grew up with it, right? Meaning I was in product management, always have been in product management, led the product management side. So supplier negotiation, cost, we own the sell price, we own the gross margin, we own all of that from a product management. And leading that team, we found that there was a need for data. So the categories that I led were more, let's call it retail oriented, MRO oriented, safety, janitorial, packaging, material handling. So when we went to do things, safety was always one of those that got pulled out, and it was a very big grower at the time, right? So it always was growing month over month, year over year. So it was always a category that we said, hey, let's put safety through this. So world-class data. When we first did our PIM, let's make sure that safety's clean, the data's clean, we're growing here.
So you started with safety, fast growing.
Yeah. So being the leader of safety allowed me to be part of all these conversations with our consultants, with our experts in the field as we hired, as we were doing things. So I learned from just literally 15 years of us progressing into a more content type of organization. And then also from the big book piece, when MSC had our big book, we were, constantly putting data attributes in there. And then when we talked about moving that big book and we were trying to put both ends together, the marketing content and our back end, I was part of that. And I had to kind of mold that, push that together. They helped lead that team to do that.
How did the data operations team, who did they report to? Do those people report into people like you, or do they report into other departments?
So they had dotted lines into product management, but they ultimately went up into IT, and then they moved over to marketing, and then they went into what we call operations within product management. So it was part of our supplier side. And then governance went into IT and then back. So we experimented a lot with these groups, and the group got bigger as we grew. But now it sits within its own what we called center of excellence. So it's truly one center of excellence that can support not just product management, but marketing, web, warehousing, AP. It's one place because that's where it belongs.
Just a side note. So I worked a lot with Mike Roth back in the day. And so I'm 6'3", he's a tall dude.
He's a tall dude. He's
too.
Like 6'2", yeah.
So I always struggled to find shirts that fit me. And I just thought it was because of my height. And so I would talk to him about, where do you buy your shirts? And I would tell him, I found some shirts. And then one day he turned to me, he's like, I don't understand why you're always talking about shirts. He said, I buy regular size shirts. And then he said, lift up your arms. And he said, not all of us have gorilla long arms like you do. And it was the first time I realized that my arms were abnormally long. It wasn't that I was 6'2". It was that my arms were just abnormally long. And he pointed that out to me, in 2009, I think.
He's a smart guy.
Very, very.
He's a smart guy. He's always been at the crux of the data piece for MSC. He's someone that MSC always relied on too, to make sure that he always led it. He was always there.
So from your perspective, what are the pros and cons when talking about content and making it strategic, putting resources behind it from the distribution side and then from the manufacturing side? What are kind of the pros and cons of that?
Yeah. So it's when you look at this, if you don't do it, if you don't have really good content, it's very hard to go and even sell. And let's start from the distributor and even some of the smaller distributors. And I can give you examples that I can point to. Content's not just about marketing content and what's on your website. If you choose to have a website or things of that nature, it's all about when you invoice, your packing slips. So I'll give you an example. If you don't have good content on your invoices, when your customers go to pay them, they're going to question, like, what is this? It just can't say like foam. And you're referring to a 12-ounce foam cup that's white, that's $500 to a case. They don't know that. It can't so content goes to everything that you do. So take your time. The cons are really consequential to not have it, right? So you can lose business, lose customer trust. There's a whole host of things. It takes a lot of time. You won't get paid. There's a lot of things here, downstream impacts, if you don't invest in your content. The bigger pros, the pros outweigh the cons 35, 50 to 1, because it's truly good content makes for a better buying experience. You get, again, it's easier to buy for your customers. You just make it easier for your sales team when they're looking at content. When you look at just distributors who do RFPs, when they look at your data compared to the customer data, if they don't know what the hell you have, how are they going to match it to what the customer has? And a lot of times the customer data is 100 times worse than your data. So again, data content is really important. And then when you go to bring that to the web and you decide to have a website, you decide to have apps, everything has to match. It really has to talk and tell the story to the customer in order for it to make a difference. Data is king. That is really something that you want to focus on, because the more data you have, the more data points that you have. And when I talk data, it goes from images to attributes to your content and the way it's structured. So a customer, easy buying decisions, get in, get out, and be happy and satisfied. That's the key.
At the same time, there's no such thing as good content, right? It's a program, not a project. This is something that we've preached here for so long. It's a program, not a project.
Yes.
There's no start date. There's no end date. There's just this program in place. You've described the people to continuously improve the content, but it really doesn't end, because there is no such thing as good content, just content that's improving.
Yeah. And what's next, right? So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, who knew that you were going to be able to take this little portable device and be able to order product, right? And people who had the really good content were first to market because they were able to put it onto that platform. So what's next after this, right? What's next after the phone? What's the next evolution after this? If you don't have that backbone, your content is the backbone of your business. It truly is. It's something that you really need to take seriously and ensure that truly is that backbone. Because if you don't, you are going to be so far behind when the next evolution comes through that it's going to be very difficult for you to catch up, and the competition is going to leave you in the dust.
So new AI tools that are coming out, AI is really based off of not just data, but knowledge. And one thing we're watching happening in both manufacturing and distribution is baby boomers retiring at an alarming rate. Not an alarming rate, it's an expected rate, right? Because they're baby boomers. And with that, the knowledge they have about applications of products, of how they're used, even though this product isn't marketed as a fit to this thing, it can be used in that thing because that guy's done it. He was a plumber for so many years, or an electrician for so many years. He knows that product. So that knowledge is walking out the door. Yet we have AI that eats knowledge for lunch, right? And the more knowledge you pump into it, the better results you get to it, not just for building product data, but actually tools for customers. Have you thought about, like, how do you digitize or collect or aggregate knowledge more than just like data and descriptions and attributes?
Yeah, so that's a big question because it's something that you have to look at and view because it's coming. It's coming, but how do you prepare for it? How do you, like you mentioned, like all these folks who are, those baby boomers are going to be out the door. You may have some who may take advantage of AI and start teaching AI tools because it's
Mhm.
actually easier than going to work every day, right? So they could do that from home. So you may see a lot of that start popping up very, very short. Those type of positions, those type of jobs for that knowledge sharing.
I think that's an incredible idea. I think you could, if you're a distributor or a manufacturer, but certainly in the distribution space, you could take advantage of retirement and people wanting to do part-time work and build tools for them to just talk,
Yes.
right? Just talk about the product, record that, have the transcript, and then build some of those concepts back in. I think that's great. You know, working with some manufacturing distributors in my past, that's what they spent a lot. They had people go around and interview people inside their company, just asking them questions like that and letting the rabbit trails happen, right? Because the rabbit trails were actually the gold, and they were very rich in those conversations. And you could do the same thing. I think that's great. But just the idea of a desire to do that for what's coming now, that data is so important. When I trained, we just released a GPT here for the association, and a lot of that GPT I just talked to. I sat there and had a conversation, hours. I mean, it wasn't 15 minutes of conversation; it was hours and hours of conversation,
Unbelievable.
recording back and forth, and building these concepts out to be able to feed into the GPT. But in that process, I pulled out knowledge that was pretty deep in my head versus just kind of surface level descriptions about what we were doing. And any company, I mean, that's not an expensive thing to do. Any company can take advantage of that today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and just think about the again, going back to that knowledge base, and a lot of people who retire don't want to they retire and they're like, all right, what can I do now? Right? They don't
Right.
want to work the 40 hours. They don't want to go into an office every day anymore. They don't want to be on the road selling or as you mentioned before, um the plumbers, the electricians, that if they are able to take advantage of an AI tool and teach it or talk to it about how to do some applications and the way they were doing them, and that knowledge now can be used to get passed on. Oh my God, that is just nirvana.
By the
For
way,
both
if
sides.
anybody's listening
Both
to
sides.
this and wants to start this business, I am 100% behind you.
I'm with them. I'm with you also. It's just
Yeah, I mean, it's a,
you
it's
need
a.
the funding. Let's go.
I don't even think it's a very expensive thing to be able to do. I mean, all you're setting someone up with is literally a phone and a microphone, and a good kind of library of questions to help kind of dig that information out from that individual, recording it, creating transcripts, building a library of those, creating its own taxonomy around those concepts. It's a pretty good idea.
That's going to be, if someone does that, I'm going to be really mad.
Yeah.
Can we patent that? Can we do it this right now? I mean,
What's the URL we should buy?
Here we go. Buying it
Anthony?
now.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in
we
for
should.
that.
Holy cow!
It is a good. It's
$10
actually
million
an amazing
idea right there. It's just look at some of the the jobs that are going by the wayside today you're finding hard, to find people to fill them. The welders, the plumbers. It's just electricians. It's because people chose a different path, right? They did the 4-year school as opposed to doing the apprenticeship piece. That in the old world that used to happen. So we're falling short of those type of individuals. I mean, I can tell you when I was at MSC, one of the biggest piece was from a metalworking perspective, the people on the floor, the people at the spindle, they were the old timers that were actually working the machines, and fill the job gap was a big motto for MSC and helping helping end users be more productive for the tools that they were using and things of that nature was very, very, very important, because we knew that that person only had a matter of time before they retired, and how do we help fill that knowledge
I
gap?
love that. I mean, the path to the distributor used to be like, I am a plumber and I just kind of get tired of plumbing, so I sell my company or let it go away, and I join the local branch where I have a little bit better of a schedule, get to use my expertise. I've been doing this for 20 years. And then from the branch, I become a regional vice president of a region of branches. And then, I mean, that was the path, it was a very from the bottom to the top
Right.
path in most distribution companies. And that doesn't exist today. But yet that knowledge is probably even more valuable than it was back then. And someone should definitely do something about that. That's amazing. Anthony, really, really appreciate it. This is just an amazing conversation. Appreciate it. We'll definitely have to do this again very, very soon. And then we'll have to do some brainstorming about our new company we're going to start.
Absolutely. That would be a lot of fun. I can tell you that. I mean, it's going to be something that we definitely need to do. I mean, it's look at all the people we could help with that.
Yeah. And very, I mean, again, not
on both sides of the equation. On the distribution
side, you could build a market. Yeah, you could build literally a marketplace of people that you could build a gig economy for knowledge in the trades. And that the knowledge, and especially if you could use AI to categorize things and correctly extract the right concepts from what they're saying. Even the slang, Anthony, like just learning the slang and having AI question, like, what do you call that? Like pulling up a product. Like imagine, I'm kind of going off on a tangent now, but this is really good. Imagine if you're in this gig economy and you're retired and it pulls up a picture of a product and it asks you, like, what is this? And they say it's they might say it's a 90-degree, and they might say it's a, blah, blah, blah slang word. Are there other names for that you know of? And they would say that, like, what's it used for? Are there any unique uses? Have you ever used one of these in like a bush fix for something? Like if you had AI that was asking those types of questions, and especially if you've been in this business for a while, you could sit there probably and talk for hours about these products.
Yes.
That would actually be pretty amazing.
That'd be amazing. And because a lot of those folks, like you said, that knowledge is just going away, and it's going away faster than we're replacing it. I think it's
right.
It's unbelievable. It's literally, it has to be at least 50-1. You lose 50 and one person joins, that type of thing. That's why it's in such high demand, those jobs these days.
Yeah. What are you doing now, Anthony?
So I'm consulting. I am working. I have a couple different clients that I'm working with. One is a company called Green Boom. I'm the acting chief revenue officer there. So I have sales and marketing, helping them. They're a startup, helping them get their business off the ground. They're a manufacturer. They're a manufacturer. They're a green tech company that is revolutionizing the way sorbents are manufactured. So most sorbents, 99% of sorbents today in the United States and abroad in Europe, are made of plastics. This is all natural product. It's made of cotton and wheat straw. Any of the fillers, the pillows, the booms, the socks, it works as good, if not better. It doesn't rip or tear or melt, but there's no single-use plastics when you use it going into landfill any longer. So just think about this in terms of Green Boom, right? So when you have an oil spill, you're trying to clean up oil, which is a toxic type of product anyway, right? You are now taking polypropylene and you're doubling down on the problem and then you're throwing it away into landfill. So you're
oil on top of oil.
It's ridiculous. So anyway, so Green Boom, I met them last year, and I just fell in love with the mission and the goal. And we're slowly coming to market. The other company I'm working with is US Paper. They're down in Florida. They're a small Jansen paper distributor. Again, startup company they started last year, distributing this product to end users, bars, restaurants, catering halls, things of that nature. And they're really just starting to take off because they are using their service model and overall the strategy that we built in the beginning, and just making sure their teams are all on the same boat. So one delivery to the next delivery to the next delivery are all the same. You get that same experience. So the drivers are coming in, putting the product away for the customer versus dropping it at their door or their dock. So it's been a lot of fun. This company is growing leaps and bounds. I love it. It's something that their goal and our goal is to go from Florida and just start building and expanding up the East Coast, from Florida to New York over the next 5 to 8 years. So exciting stuff going on and just helping companies strategies and get out of the gate. So it's been good.
How to get a hold of you? They want to reach you.
Yeah. So you can reach me. So Anthony.Testa at the Trada Group, TRADA group.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well as a crowdfunding link for our new product together.
Our new invention.
And if I was joking, that might be funny, but I'm only kind of kidding because I think it's actually really good.
I think it's a great idea. I think you and I are onto something.
Absolutely. So. Anthony, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been great. I appreciate the time. And again, I want to see that crowdfunding go up.
You got it.
We'll see it soon.